So, hi, I'm Victoria Alexander. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm I started 19 years ago, almost 20, to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers. I've developed a series of workshops like this, Q&A or webinar style for buying into Brooklyn or selling into Brooklyn. We've done classes with estate attorneys, lawyers, insurance brokers, everybody that's going to need to help. You're going to need to know in your life as a property owner that's going to help guide you through this process, because I think that adding value, it just empowers people, and I think that's, we want to add a lot of value to people's experience and help empower them and feel educated about this process, because there is a lot of gatekeeping and feel like barriers to information, and there's that shouldn't be. So we're hopefully are changing that by making these classes and providing them to people. So welcome. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Marina, and Rebecca and I started Makeshift Architecture in 2020, which we always joke is great timing for the world, but we are here and we have over 20 years of experience in commercial and hospitality work as well as community work, but we have a focus in residential now. And our name Makeshift is important to us because it's a play on words. It's making space and shifting conversations and shifting the process, because what's really important to us in our practice is working hand in hand with our clients and meeting everyone where they are and focusing on what that process of collaboration looks like together to get to a beautiful space that you can inhabit and spend time in and invest in, rather than something that's just designed for you and given to you, right? So that's what Makeshift's about, and we're excited to get into this conversation.
Great, guys. So I want to just thank you guys so much for joining. I really appreciate you putting your time and energy into this and having just really frank conversation about some things that concern a lot of my clients and people I work with and know, and really just educating about this process. So I really appreciate you guys participating. So I'm going to ask you the first thing. When people think of architects, they usually have a preconceived idea of what that is that you do. But what may not encompass all the expertise you offer? Could you talk about the skills and services you can offer clients?
Yeah. So I don't know exactly what people's conception of architects is, but it seems like when we interact with clients for the first time, sometimes the expectation is that we just walk into a space and immediately can just visualize everything that needs to happen just from basically having no information at all. And while sometimes those kind of like flashes of vision and inspiration do occur, I think what people miss is just the real research and iteration and the process of architecture. So for us, that's really about learning about our clients and what exactly their needs are, the way they want to use the space, their aesthetic style, but also their functional needs. And early on, it's really this process of learning about our clients. And then we're doing quite a bit of research on the architectural context in terms of massing, but also historical styles, what makes sense in terms of what will fit into the building design stylistically, spatially, geometrically. And then we are taking that and marrying it up with the design program that we've talked about through all of our conversations with the client, and using our technical expertise to bring a project to life. So there's all these different layers. It's not just what does it look like? It's not just what does it feel like? It's not just how does it function? It's like all of those things together, marrying them into something that like truly fits the client's needs and project brief. And
Plus,
is of course
huh,
beautiful, compliant, and all of the other things.
yeah, plus how you get to all of those things, like the road in front of you. It's not just the end product that all of those things encompasses, but also like how do you achieve those things? And that's, I think, a big part of the value of working with somebody, that you guys have the foresight and knowledge to end up with the product that people want to have.
Yeah.
So, you know, that there's a whole different perception of what real estate brokers are and do, and that's being talked about across the country right now.
Yes.
Thankfully, I do not fit into any of those stereotypes and have done a lot of advocacy around changing those perceptions. And I really appreciate other people that have the same sort of mission and are driven in the same way that I am. So I really have a lot of respect for what you guys do. So the other questions that I think that a lot of people are always thinking of are, what are some of the things people should consider do when they're thinking about renovating or adding onto their home? What is the first sort of steps that you try to outline for people?
Yeah, so I would say there are probably like 5 or 6 different things you should be thinking about. The first is what your timeline and budget looks like. As far as timeline goes, a lot of people work backwards and they think, when do I actually want to like be in the space? When do I want to move in? So that's one parameter. And then as far as budget goes, have you set aside enough money to do the renovation on top of securing the property itself? I think I would recommend further on this conversation to go back to the conversation we had last week in our session where Victoria talked a little bit about appreciation values, return on investments, when's a good time to invest in your renovation and project and get that return on investment, as well as how long you need to be in the space and how long the renovation needs to have happened in order for you to get the most out of your money. I think that helps with the conversation of budgeting. Another thing we ask our clients to really think about is their priorities, and we want everyone to be really honest with themselves in this particular consideration, because there's things that you want to do and there's things that you should do. And so we want to hear all of it, but we want you to be very clear about what it is you need to do so that we can prioritize those things first. And then we can see how the kind of wish list items marry into that and work together and surprise us with what solutions are available. We also just want you to guide us in this experience of what it is you want out of your project, your goals, whether that's growing your family or just maintaining a certain lifestyle. And is this like a short-term investment versus a forever home? I think those are really important things to note when you're talking to a designer or thinking about renovating. Also, if you are in New York City, the co-op and condo conversation is really important. Do you understand what is required of your building, from your building to renovate? We talked about this a little bit in our last session with Victoria last week, but some co-ops have a specific alterations agreement and you have to follow these certain rules before you can even get to a renovation project with an architect and with the Department of Buildings. And then I think the last thing that's really important is just gather as much information as you can about your space. What's existing? Do you have enough power? Has the roof had work on it? Does it have asbestos that we don't know about? What kind of utilities are there now, whether it's gas or electric? Kind of once we have an understanding of all of those different things, it's easier for us to really help you navigate what's possible and help you plan for your next steps.
Yeah, I will also just say, on the flip side, sometimes I think clients feel like they have to have everything figured out. And a lot of people do almost come to us like with a design. Here, I just want you to like draw this up for me.
Yeah.
And that's also great. But it's not required. And I think there's this sweet spot, knowing on a global level, like what your goals are for the project, and then also trusting your designer to carry out what makes sense in terms of all of the layered parameters that I talked about before. People come to us sometimes with this one client came to us recently with a 33-page list of requirements for the house. And on the one hand, it's wow, this is just an incredible resource for us. And on the other hand, it's sometimes that does limit the creativity. Like, that's why I say there's a sweet spot. So I would say gather what you can, create your list of goals, but then also just go into your relationship with your designer, being able to trust that they are also going to have the skills to draw out of you what's required to get the project done. If you don't have a survey, like we will have that done for you. If you don't have a geotechnical report, we will help get the ball rolling. It's a balance, I would say.
Right. It's
I'm
a guiding
hearing-
of experience. And
I'm hearing a lot of words like trust and relationship. So it sounds like communication is like a really important part of this process. Do you guys want to talk about how important that is?
Yes.
yeah.
I think oh, go ahead, Marina.
Oh, no, I was going to say, go ahead, Rebecca, but
See
communication
how
is really
important
key.
communication is?
Yeah,
it
you
is.
have to allow for room for, in this particular example, right? You have to allow for room for people to feel heard and seen and give them space to kind of state what it is their experiences or the experience they want, while also communicating what the expectations are going into it, because essentially you're entering into a relationship with your architect or us, and we want to be able to trust each other. We want to have transparency in all the different areas of the project that we're working on together without overwhelming you. And then we also want to have a level of just space to let the project evolve and flexibility for that to grow, because you don't want to be so strict. As Rebecca was saying, there's a sweet spot. You don't want to be so strict in like how you communicate, what you communicate, because that doesn't allow for us to discover the possibilities together.
Yeah, that's well said. I think the idea of trust also, we need to be able to have, I guess, going into it with the expectation that the design process is just something that takes time, and there is a necessary back and forth between us and our clients, and our process like allows for that and requires it and gradually gets more and more detailed. I think one of the things sometimes I sense as a concern with people from the beginning is that if everything isn't documented in that first conversation, that like it won't end up in the project. And so I can almost feel stress in those first program conversations. What if I didn't say I wanted a bidet and I actually do want that? And so that's, I think, where just like intensity and detail comes from. But the process allows for us to layer in more detail as the project progresses without getting too far into the weeds. Like most architects work in a phased approach where you're starting with kind of the general concept for the space, schematically laying everything out, making sure that it works in terms of code and zoning and just spatially, and then working towards more detailed sets of drawings, providing a drawing set to the city if that's required, and then providing a set to the contractor for pricing, and then providing a final set, and that's the construction set. So allowing for the dialogue to evolve over time and for us to get the detail we need to get from our clients over the course of sometimes a months-long process, as opposed to needing everything to get uncovered and revealed in the first couple of conversations. I think sometimes that's a stress point for people.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you need to build trust and have good communication and lay groundwork so that it will be a success. And I think that it sounds like you guys have been really thoughtful about that. It's nice to hear. So if I'm not that person and I'm overwhelmed and I can't like even fathom where I'm supposed to begin, where do I begin?
Yeah. So I think this is where just reaching out and saying, here's what I'm not happy with in my space. Like sometimes just starting with knowing what's not working, or I just know that I don't like it. That is a good starting point. And then we would probably engage in a more comprehensive scope of services, starting with that programming phase where we're like really working with you to have the dialogue around what are your goals, how do you live, what are spaces that inspire you, what are spaces that you maybe don't like we're having these dialogues that reveal ideas about the type of space that you might want to inhabit. And then we're also layering in like the programming conversation. So like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, do you want that laundry room? Do you want a mud room? Is like a vestibule important to you? So we would get into the details of programmatically what you're looking for. And then from there, start to develop some feasibility around, is that project doable based on the parameters of the site?
Yeah, and sometimes I would say too, what some clients have found helpful is just walking the space, like doing an initial consult with us, of just going to the space and walking it together and just talking through the possibilities, or again, as Rebecca said, what you like in this space or what you don't, or how you feel in it. And that can sometimes reveal itself to what you actually want in real time with us.
Yeah. And based on that, we would put together a program, a scope of work, and then develop a set of an architectural proposal based around that. There'd just be like a little bit more work in the beginning to get to a point where we can say, okay, this is the scope of work. This is the scope of the project.
Because sometimes there are people, not me, like that don't know what they want. They're like, I've created like 10 Pinterest boards and I'm all of that. But I think that people like sometimes are like, I know this isn't working. I don't know how to change it. I don't know how to fix it, but I know that this is broken with a lot of things in this world right now, actually. But so I think that's sometimes the best place for people to reach out to an architect or professional because they don't get too far down the rabbit hole without getting the advice that they need along the way. So the magical thing they saved on Pinterest is never going to become a reality because of XYZ. And if they had known that, then they wouldn't have gotten their hopes up.
And I think the other thing, and this is where that trust and just having a little bit of mental flexibility to accept that we might be able to figure out a way to get you to that goal without maybe needing to, for example, some people are like, I really want to do an addition. And you're like, great, what's your program? And they're like, I want 4 bedrooms. Actually, you could create a bedroom out of this other space in your house, or you could carve up the space in a different way. Maybe you utilize that basement, or I think we can also help figure out ways to just better utilize existing space. And sometimes it does require building up or building down or building out or wherever, but sometimes not. And so we usually in our schematic design come up with 2 options for folks. And sometimes that second option is, this is what you asked for, but then here's another way to get where you want to go without maybe needing to do the expansion.
Right, because you never know. Some people come to us with an exact idea. I want this farmhouse look with these particular amenities and programming. And after talking with them a little bit more, sometimes that second option that we give you that explores maybe a different route you might not have thought of might actually be more well suited to what you want and you didn't even realize it. So again, it's that flexibility and like thinking and being open to discovering different things with us in that beginning phase.
And not every house needs to be a farmhouse.
Yeah, not every house.
I think it's really interesting because I think it's really hard to navigate that relationship because I think that people feel, I think less so in my business because people don't ever pay me till we get to a finish line and most buyers don't pay me at all right now. And that's probably going to change in the future. But I think that there's definitely this like service industry sort of mentality, like when you're paying a lawyer or anybody, like you work for me. And it's hard to, okay, we need to start out as partners here rather than this like other dynamic that seems to, I think there's a perception that that's what happens, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That dynamic just seems like the natural way to roll in because of that's how your service industry professionals interact with you now, but it's such a different beast.
Yeah, I think that's why we just as a general rule try to be flexible in terms of the types of services that we offer and just the way that we structure our services. Some clients really want to have a fixed fee. Other clients really want to work with us at an hourly rate with like estimates of how many hours. Based on the scope of the project, we might offer different set of services because not every client is going to need the renderings. Not every client is going to need a permit set. Not every client is going to need a construction set. And the flexibility that we ask for from our clients, we also aim to provide on our side as well.
Yeah, and I would add too onto that. Yes, you are hiring us to work on this project with and for you, but the with is the really important part rather than the for. I would say not that we are at all like doctors, but the relationship is similar, right? Where you go to a doctor and you tell them all these things that are going on with you and your experiences and like, how can we come up, like, how can we think of what's going on here? And it's similar with us, right? Like you come to us, you tell us what your experiences are, we take that and then we help guide you into what we think would be a reasonable design solution and how to approach that rather than either of us saying you have to do it this way or the other way. So it's really about creating that relationship.
Agreed.
It seems challenging, but glad somebody's doing it. Are different in the process if I'm a home buyer looking to renovate my future home or I'm a homeowner looking to renovate? Like, what's the difference you think at different stages that for those two different stages?
I think sometimes it's just like about, I think a lot of times it comes down to like your ability to prioritize. If you've lived in a space for a long time, chances are you're taking stock of what's working and what's not working, versus if you're moving into a house for the first time, or you're building that house from scratch, maybe you don't have the benefit of kind of, at least on some level, knowing how the space currently operates, and so therefore being able to like know what you want. So I think sometimes that makes the programming phase not super necessary, because you're just like, I know I need more space. I want to add another bedroom because I'm having a child or for whatever reason. That's probably how I would answer that question, is just like the scope of services if you're starting from scratch versus you live in the house and you're renovating will be a little bit different.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's really that pre-design phase of programming, and whether or not we even do a site walkthrough consultation as you're like about to purchase the space, right? Like some of the stuff can happen before you land on a space when you don't own the space yet. But if you already own the space, then obviously it's more just walking through and talking through what works and what doesn't work, and in that way.
Yeah, I think there's also just like the technicalities. If you're just doing interior alterations, not having to go through a zoning review, versus if you're building from scratch or you're doing an addition, needing to just build in more time in the design process and in the review process for the required permits that you're going to need, and just the review process inherent in that. So that's also different.
Yeah, I would also say too, again, going to the conversation of relationships, especially in New York, if you already have lived in a place for a long time, you probably already have a good relationship with your neighbors and with the people in your building and your co-op board or condo board. Whereas if you're new and are purchasing, you might not quite have that relationship yet. And so there's a little bit more work that has to be done in order to get all those things in order before you engage with an architect and start a renovation project.
One other thing I was thinking of too was like on the other end of the design, once you start building, if you're renovating the home you're living in, there's also that age-old question of, okay, where am I going to live during construction? And am I going to try to just move around the construction site? Or do I have space to live with parents or friends or family? And that's also something to think through. Depending on the project, you may not be able to live on site for portions of it.
And we usually recommend not living on site if that's possible, just because it's a construction site and there's going to be dust. Even if the best contractors are trying to maintain that and enclose it in specific work areas, you're still going to have dust. You're going to have just people in and out, disrupting maybe your schedule, especially if you work from home. We try to recommend that you find a separate space to be in if you can.
Yeah, there's going to be like, even the best kept job sites, there will be dust that cannot be perfectly controlled. There will be inevitably miscellaneous hardware and sharp objects lying around, and it's just not going to be a very
I think that people are unaware of the particulate matter that then would be in the air, the chemicals, like if they're staining something or painting something, and the fumes. And if you're not, even if you're using the highest quality and low fume products, it's like you're still exposing yourself. It's always surprised me when I see construction workers not wearing masks and not using protection, don't have earplugs in. Guys were like jackhammering across my street and my house was shaking. So I went out to see what's going on, and like none of them had ear protection on or masks on, and they're pulling up asphalt. I was like, do you know what you're breathing in right now? And I just don't think that people are unaware of like the exposure and like the health risks associated with that exposure. We expose ourselves to so many things, it just becomes like, an afterthought of our everyday practice.
Totally. Yeah, the noise thing is, I think, an under considered.
Can't be on Zoom calls.
And just like the threshold for hearing damage is like so much lower than you think it is. So jackhammers for hours on a day, yeah, that's going to affect your health in the long run.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I have tinnitus in one of my ears from that. So it's a real thing you don't think about. I have that little alert on my iPhone, on my watch. It's too noisy here for you. And I was like, oh my God, really? This is too noisy? Like you don't really, before the watch, I was like totally unaware of like how loud things were, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
like the notifications on my phone too, which is like one of those like iPhone things that is, oh, this is like useful and also like really creepy at the same time. Both things are true.
Yeah, and I think people also think they can tune out those noises and like the mess and the things that they're breathing in, but it does affect your productivity and your well-being and your attention span too, like whether you realize it or not. So just something else to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your stress level,
Mhm.
because it's going to make something that's real estate in New York, I always say is like one of the most stressful processes to go through. And then I'm sure like straight up there with you is doing a renovation in New York City. The stress level is really high, and our jobs really are to like manage people's stress level and make the process as fluid as possible and as least stressful. But that there's things that are outside of our control, and the things we can control is like encouraging our clients to do what is in their best interest to make sure that their quality of life is um, not so detrimentally impacted that it makes them regret every decision that they're about to make, because that happens.
You
Like,
think,
I'm not buying this apartment. I can't move there. I hate it now.
yeah. And just if you think about all of the decisions that go into making a renovation or a design project come to life.
Mhm.
And there's a million different ways you could do almost any renovation. Obviously, we're optimizing as much as we can, but every decision has an effect. And sometimes when clients are living on site, you end up questioning along the way decisions because you can't quite see the final product. And so you're like, well, wait, I didn't know that pipe was there. Maybe I should move this. And then it's just this, it becomes a difficult process to manage making changes like as the construction project is already taken off. And like we're always open to making modifications, but it just can become a cumbersome process like once the ball is already rolling, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I think it also becomes a conversation of what do you actually want to prioritize here? Because now for making this change, this is going to add more costs and more time because you want to adjust this kind of quality thing that may or may not make a difference, and it may or may not affect these other decisions. Rebecca said everything that we design, we're flexible and open to changing, but a lot of times the things that we've done have a reason for why they're being done in the way that designed in the way that they are designed, and that inherently affects these other design decisions and like builds on, like there's a layering on top of it, and once you like try to go back and peel off a layer, it's really hard to add those same layers back on.
Does clients get like decision fatigue? That's something that I definitely experienced during my renovation. Is that something that like you feel like clients get burnt out on?
I'm sure they do. I don't think clients tell us that. And also, I think this is also goes back to the services, like our packages are always structured based on what clients need. So if people know what like finishes, fixtures, and all of that they would like, and they're comfortable with making those selections, that's great. Go for it. We will, of course, advise on the spatial requirements and any other guidance that we think is relevant. But one of the services we do provide is like selecting all of those things for our clients. So for the person who might feel like they're going to have that decision fatigue, it's probably worth just like letting your designer curate the package with you. And again, it's like always a little bit of collaboration and back and forth. Like we'll select 25 things and then you might like 20 of them, but you hate 5, or there's always going to be that kind of like back and forth. So for the decision fatigued among us, you might just require a higher level of design service.
Yeah, we also try to put the decisions like not all at once on you either in our phases. And that's again going back to the different design phases. We start out big picture and then we really start to zoom in. And then we try to make decisions based on that level of zooming in and also timing of construction. So, maybe you need to make decisions about what kind of appliances or plumbing fixtures first, but we're not going to ask you to also make decisions about tile and paint and light fixtures at the same time. We're going to space it out and then tell you, okay, now it's time to think about your light fixtures, and then later on, okay, now let's talk about tile and paint and those kind of things later on. So we try not to make it too overwhelming, but again, if that is something that you're worried about, you can always just trust us to help recommend things at the beginning.
I want to let, it's been 40 minutes, so we're going on and on about design and real estate right now. Is there anything you guys want to like just summarize the conversation with or want people to know?
I truly do think that no project is too small or too big, and that we're always happy to we offer a 30-minute complimentary conversation with anyone who wants to talk with us. Happy to just always jump on a quick call with people and just discuss possibilities and what a project might look like.
Yeah, and then there are no like stupid questions. Like this is all a discovery process at the beginning anyway, and like we really want to lean into that and allow room for that potential together. So please reach out, we'd be excited to work with you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for your time and energy and your perspective and expertise. I think it's super valuable for people to have this information before they, go down this path, and to just have expert advice, and not feel like there's barriers to it. So I really appreciate you joining me, and I hope that we can work on some new workshops in the future. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.